I have a fascination with fairy tale villains, and one of the most compelling to me is the evil queen from Snow White, a woman who's obsessed with her mirror. I've always wondered about that ever since I was little. Did she really ask who's the fairest of them all? I mean, come on, she's a queen, a head of state. She has bigger worries than a few wrinkles. In Poisoned, my retelling of Snow White, something darker than vanity is driving the queen. I delved deep into her backstory to see if I could find out what it was, and I'd like to share a little of what I learned with you. For starters, she has a name, and it's Adelaide. I think there's a lot more to Adelaide than we've been told. And I'd like to read you a passage from the book. Here it is, one that gave me a lot of insight into her. Chapter 25. The coffin in the king's chapel was small and draped in black. The child inside it, a boy, was dressed in his white christening gown. His eyes were closed, his tiny hands folded over his chest. He was only 4 months old. The boy's father, the King of Saxony, was kneeling by the coffin, his head bent. The boy's mother, broken by grief, was weeping in her bed. Adelaide saw them, her brother, her father, her mother, long dead, all of them, but alive again in the depths of her mirror. And then she saw herself, a little girl of 5. Her hair was braided, her eyes were solemn. She was clutching a bouquet of flowers in her small hands. She'd picked them herself. A few had wilted, for it had taken her time to make her way from the Queen's garden to the chapel. She walked down the aisle to the altar. Her father was weeping. She could hear his sobs. It made her heart ache to see him so sad. "Don't cry, Papa," she said as she came up behind him, but he didn't hear her. Unsure what to do, she moved closer and patted his arm. The king startled at her touch. He raised his head. Adelaide barely recognized him. Grief had ravaged his once handsome face. "Papa, look," she said, offering her bouquet. "I brought you flowers." The king stared at the blooms, but he didn't take them. Then he looked at her. "3 sons dead in as many years. But you, Adelaide, you thrive. You grow tall and strong." He raised his eyes to the ceiling. "God in heaven, why? Why do you take my sons and leave me with a useless girl?" Adelaide's hand fell slowly to her side. Tears smarted behind her eyes. She had not known that she was useless. Her tutor said that she was smart. Her nurse said that she was kind. The king stood. He looked into the coffin. "My son, my little boy," he said, pounding the heels of his hands against his head. Adelaide wiped her eyes. The movement caught her father's attention. "Come here, child, come," he said, beckoning her. But Adelaide, afraid now, shook her head. She backed away. The king lunged for her. His hand closed on her shoulder. The flowers fell on the cold stone floor. "Look at him, Adelaide," he said, pushing her up to the coffin. "Look at your poor dead brother lying there. Do you see him?" Adelaide nodded, trying hard to be brave. She didn't like the baby anymore. His eyes were sunken under their paper-thin lids. His face was stiff and gray. "Why, Adelaide?" the king cried. "Why wasn't it you?" The image faded, but the pain of her father's words remained. Still, after all these years, had anyone else been in the room with her, they would have seen that there was nothing in the glass. No king, no coffin, no heartbroken girl. There was just a woman, thin as a whisper, hollow-eyed, haunted.